We're back in action. So now we have the resident survey results, and we have Kath, Peter, and Lynn. Is that right?
That's right.
Yep. Thank you very much. Present away.
Present away. Now I'm
Pete,
going first. Okay. Look, good morning, everyone. It's that time of year again. Resident surveyor results. Quick context. I think from memory, this is the largest survey in the city. It's also probably the longest running, with about 20 years worth of data behind it. I will stress, especially when we talk about overall service results, the survey is not about individuals or individual people, okay? It's about our services. And in particular, it's about our achievement of levels of service targets. Satisfaction from this survey is only one of the level of service goals. I mean, others, as you know from the LTP, revolve around quantity, quality, access, responsiveness. But what people are telling us about our services is an important factor. As always, with about 400 products and services, there's a mix of results here. I'm pleased to say there's quite a number of good results that have hit the goals we were looking for. And when we get to overall satisfaction, there's been a bit of a lift there as well. We've asked them additional questions this year around transport, because the single question on roading gave us a single one-dimensional view. We've asked some questions around it now, and in the hope that would help give it some clarity. Possibly it does, but it also gives us some contradictory data to deal with. So that is not a simple area to discuss. There's also some questions about reputation and trust, but really before I go on, I just want to thank Kath and the team, because this is the earliest the results have ever been to you. The reason for that was to help with the LTP process, and it's meant a lot of long hours for the team. So I'd just like to thank them for that. Now, there are some factors that might be contributing to the results this year. There always are. I just want to be careful to say these are not excuses, but they're legitimate factors that are out there in the community, especially around cost of living. I don't think anything there will surprise you. I won't read them all out, but obviously high inflation, cost of living, interest rates, the change of government last October. We're still having supply chain issues in the capital program to some extent. And like the rest of the country, labour and skill shortages, contractors are a definite factor in what's going on. There are always some ups and downs out there in the world. Probably fair to say that at the macro and micro level, there's a degree of negativity out in the world at the moment. It'll be an interesting study to see, separate from this, but we're just speculating on what the post-COVID world is like and whether there'll be a name for what society has been through. I think this, Lynn, might be yours? No?
No,
Okay.
you're going to do this one too.
All right. Now, at the heart of the performance framework, we've got about, I think from memory, about 40 questions which revolve around levels of service goals. There are two kinds of question. I just want to do a quick refresh here. General satisfaction survey questions are around services that pretty much everyone gets: roads, water, parks, things like that. Point of contact is for people who are having a specialist service provided to them, and people with clipboards genuinely go up to them after they've experienced that service and say, can you tell us about what just happened with that interaction? Because not everybody in society does this, uses a building consent or a marina or whatever. So we do it in two different ways. There's also some contribution from Life in Christchurch to help validate the data. Okay, the big number, overall satisfaction with services, and I stress, not about individuals. There are some gains here. The data is consistent enough to say, look, there's to a degree that we've arrested the fall of some green shoots. It's by no means the improvement we'd like to see, but it is a positive sign particularly in the face of strong headwinds around cost of living and other factors. So Kath will step you through the detail of the services that underpin that, but I am happy that there's been a lift there even under difficult circumstances.
Okay, so some of the reasons why people are satisfied and dissatisfied. Those who are satisfied see the councillors doing a good job, slightly down in terms of the proportion of comments from last year, and also people seeing that they're happy with the services that we provide. For those who are dissatisfied, you'll note there are quite a few more comments from those who are dissatisfied than the satisfied. And the big one remains unhappiness with the roads and road maintenance, and that still sits at 17% of all comments, so that was the same as last year. And disapproval of council spending sits up there as well. Those who were less likely to be satisfied, Pacific peoples and those aged 65 and over. So if we look specifically at the financial ones, so you can see a very marginal decrease in those saying that they disapproved of council spending, but it's too small to call it a very big decrease there. And again, for rates increases, you can see it's sort of sitting at around 10% still, same as last year. And it's particularly, these ones are particularly an issue for our older residents, many of whom are saying we're on fixed incomes, we don't like the rates increases, we can't afford them. They talked about high management salaries and not understanding why they have to be so high. Okay, in terms of our level of service target achievement, slightly fewer services met their targets than last year, 71% compared to 75% last year. But it's still obviously the majority of services that are meeting their targets. And 23 met their targets this year and last. And they were mainly services where residents have face-to-face interaction with our staff, so where they see them as friendly and helpful and approachable, and when they have exposure to visible services and facilities and amenities that they really like, so things like the parks and the libraries and the recreation and sport centres. And then a quarter, or just over a quarter, didn't meet their targets, so 29%. And 6 didn't meet their targets this year or last year, but what we can say is that water supply responsiveness and footpath condition did improve by 4% or more this year, which was good to see, even though the rates were still relatively low. What this shows, and there's quite a bit of information on this slide, but what it's showing is that the wider green, dark green and red lines or bars are our target achievement. So we've got 71% met their targets and the 29% that didn't. But there's a real disconnect between that and our sentiment scoring, which is sitting up there this year at 64%, and that overall satisfaction score, which is the sort of darker green line in the middle there, which was at 46%, and then down below our reputation and trust average scoring, which was sitting at 27%. So we're seeing sort of real gaps there, like there's a 25% gap between targets met and overall satisfaction. Between positive sentiment and reputation, a 37% gap. And then also if you look over on the right hand side, what I've done this time is had a look across the 3 last LTP cycles between positive sentiment scoring and overall satisfaction, and you can see there that the gap in the 2015 to 25 LTP between positive sentiment scoring and overall satisfaction was only 3%, whereas in the 21 LTP that gap is sitting at 20%. So we are seeing that resident expectations are not necessarily aligned, particularly with our target performance. So our higher satisfaction services, what was really good to see there is that more services than last year fell into the highest satisfaction target, and we had the highest number in all of the last 3 LTPs, which is good to see. So I won't read out that entire list there, but what I would say is that success remains closely tied to our customer service excellence. And as I've already said, around staff manner and support, where people feel we're listening, where facilities are liked, particularly by families, and where people see that there's been good or improved maintenance and reliability of our service delivery. And these are the areas that council delivers best, and they are the same two best areas as in the last 3 years. So we've got waste management sitting up there at 23%, and people say they like the reliable and efficient 3-bin system. They particularly commented this year on the fact that they feel they get really good communication regarding curbside waste. And they love the 3-bin app, the bin app that they see is really helpful. And then we've got parks and reserves. People see them as well maintained and that they keep the city looking tidy and attractive, and they love the open spaces for recreation. So the services that saw improvements of 4% or more, what was really good to see was resource consents that improved 15% this year. We've got the marine structures and stormwater management, wastewater and water supply responsiveness. I won't read out all of them there, but the services that saw declines of 4% or more, bus shelters and bus stops, community parks, presentations, sports park surfaces, email customer service, and water supply, taste and odour, and community emergency preparedness. So lower satisfaction services, so these are the ones that score 50% or lower satisfaction. They're similar services to last year, so the decision-making ones, and then we've got water supply, taste and odour, the road and footpath condition. What was good to see no longer in the lower satisfaction bunch was stormwater management, and people talked about improvements in proactive management of flooding and stormwater infrastructure. And again, these are closely tied to customer service issues and expectation management. People feeling the council isn't listening, prioritising the nice-to-haves at the expense of core services, where people feel there's inaccurate or insufficient information or advice provided, or where there are asset maintenance issues, sometimes around perceptions of safety issues and expectations not matching matching delivery cost realities. And the areas most needing to improve, probably no surprises there. Roading remains up there at 27%, it was 24% last year. The ongoing patch repairs, the recurring potholes, uneven surfaces and disruption caused by roadworks, and council decision making and financial management. So disapproval of spending decisions, wanting more financial control, and listening to resident needs and priorities. So as Peter said, we have done a little bit more investigation this year into the road or the transport network issues, and what we're seeing here is that road condition satisfaction decreases by age, but that it's inconsistent with ease of travel perceptions, and you can see that pinkish line up the top there at 78% is the total ease of travel. So these are where we ask people how easy was it to travel either today to the service that they were using or within the city over the last year. And so you can see, even though condition is sitting fairly low, ease of travel is consistently high, and it is so for all age groups, although it does lower slightly with age, and for all modes of travel. Footpath condition, you see even greater differences there by age, so satisfaction decreases with age as dissatisfaction increases with age. And for our older residents, they talk a lot about the mobility associated with uneven and cracked footpath surfaces. And What I'm trying to show on this slide is the complex issues that we face around transport and the conflicting perceptions and priorities that we're facing here from residents that present significant decision-making challenges. For example, we have road and footpath condition that remain relatively low despite increased investment in roading in recent years. And roading remains the number one area for improvement for the council and the main reason people give for their performance dissatisfaction with the council. Yet residents also tell us that they disapprove of high spending and the council's ability to make wise spending decisions and with rates increases. And they want more financial control at a time when roading is very expensive to address. And we also see ease of travel in the city remains relatively high, and the city is seen as walking friendly, and those disconnections we see with condition satisfaction. And then we look at the transport network safety. We're just under half agree that it's safe, and it's slightly lower again for cyclists. And yet there are continued mixed views on cycleways spending. So it's showing that there's conflicts around perceptions and priorities and really complex issues that present a lot of challenges for us in terms of our decision making. Reputation and trust, we've got 15 measures of reputation and trust that was looked at by over 1,200 residents, and we've got the various scores there, and we see that low reputation and trust scoring remains a challenge, with the bulk sitting in the neutral area, but we've got pretty low proportions satisfied and very satisfied there. So the average positive rating is 27%, very similar to last year, which was 28%, and the average negative rating of 41%. So what I'm showing in this slide is the measures that are in red are the ones with the lowest positive scoring. So that's wise spending decisions, providing value for ratepayer money, council communicating clearly how resident views have informed their decisions. And they're the same three lowest as last year, and most have worsened slightly since last year. And then the colour shading, you can see there's a relative degree of consistency between the 2 years. And the pink shading over on the right shows the four that have declined the most, so they're highlighted in bold up there. So that's communicating clearly with residents about how views of informed decision making, being open and transparent, leadership of the mayor and councillors, and communicates clearly with residents the results of our decisions. So, largest increases in negative scoring, so those are the ones over there in red on the right. And I won't read out which ones they are, although what I would say is that you've got value for ratepayers' money sitting up there at an 8% increase in negative scoring from last year. Making wise spending decisions has gone up 5%, and openness and transparency has gone up 4% in this last year. What I would say with the value for ratepayers' money is that that's not too inconsistent with other cities. For example, Auckland's score also increased 7% in their last survey. So, resident sentiment. So this measures positive and negative sentiment aspects across all of the customer service delivery. So basically what I do with this is I take every single score that and this is where the scores were able to be put into positive and negative sentiment categories. So that's over 9,700 residents were in that category. So there were 84,000 scores, and you can see there that overall sentiment remains positive at 64%, which is very similar to last year at 63%. and we're sitting at 18% negative sentiment scoring. What I did this time round is that because we've now got 9 years of data, so I've got over 500,000 sentiment scores given by over 62,100 respondents. So I was interested to see what was happening over our long-term plan cycles. And what we can see there is across the 9 years, we had 66% positive sentiment scoring. So that's over 343,000 positive scores, although there were 17% or 88,000 negative scores over the whole 9 years. And we had an average overall organisation performance satisfaction score of 55%. But what you can see is that there has been a slight decline in positive sentiment across those 3 LTP cycles, with it being slightly lower for this one than the previous 2. And then just sort of finishing off with positive sentiment by ward. So the wards sitting just above the average, we've got Papanui, Banks Peninsula, Spraydon, Central, Fendleton and Linwood, and then below Hornby, Harewood, Coastal, Waimari and Heathcote. And I just had a look at Hornby and Harewood and what's going on there. They do have slightly lower overall satisfaction scores than the city average, and slightly lower scoring around some of those reputation and trust measures. But there's not a lot of information without delving a lot deeper into it as to what might be going on there. And it does fluctuate across the years as to which ones are in that lower category and the higher category. So just concluding comments, another year of mixed results, but with some improvements there. Overall satisfaction is up slightly. The majority of services are meeting their targets, and more services improved their ratings by 4% or more. The number of higher satisfaction services increased this year, yet issues persist. We've got that low reputation and trust in the same areas identified for service performance improvement as last year. We've got those conflicting resident perceptions and priorities which create complex challenges for decision making, and we gave the example of road and condition, which remains low for perception and is the primary driver of dissatisfaction despite increased investment by the council, and yet there's that disconnect with ease of travel in the city and with calls for tighter financial controls and lower rates increases. So residents are continuing to expect more of us. They're judging us poorly on spending decisions, and they want to see clearly how their views have been taken into account in what we do.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Kewen.
That was brilliant. Very accurate. Well, first question is, it almost felt like everyone question was in Harewood, looking at those answers, which was interesting. What was the mix across the city? There
is a reasonable mix, and where we are doing the general service satisfaction survey, there is representation by community board, not down to ward level, because we just it would be way too expensive because the sample size would have to be high. But we do get a good range of people across the city responding to the surveys.
Right, and then when was the last survey done in this pattern? When did this end?
It was at the end of January. So
Okay.
we survey some services throughout the year, and then we do a bulk of face-to-face surveying over the summer months when the students are with us, and then we do the general service satisfaction in sort of mid to late January.
Right, so the LTP number, as far as the wise spending goes, is not in there yet in the survey. It hasn't affected it.
They would have known about
Not,
A high rate rise.
No. Although people were aware, I think that
It's going to be
that there are
ugly.
going to be reasonable size rates increases. So it is sitting in the back of their mind, but knowing exactly what that was going to be, no.
And then the big elephant in the room is the What Matters Most survey brought out climate change on top, but I haven't heard those two words in this entire presentation. So what's the difference?
I think the thing with the resident survey is that we're asking directly about council services rather than more broad brush issues in the city and into the city's future. So climate change isn't necessarily a question that's asked directly in the resident survey, though as I did say earlier that stormwater management people are talking about liking the proactivity we've shown around flood management, so that was positive to see, but climate change isn't directly asked. Amy, was there anything specifically about the What Matters Most survey that... Sorry.
So the primary difference between the two is What Matters Most looked at every single thing that council does almost within all of our services, whereas this is, Kath said, focused on those services where there are resident feedback levels of service that we have to measure.
Right, okay.
I mean, to put it another way, this is a survey around the activities in the LTP as opposed to what's on your mind.
Yeah, but isn't this a survey where it's a survey where you go out and you ask people questions? It's not then come in, because the other survey method is you could get lobby groups hijack it, for instance. So you get everyone in a particular group go, oh, we want a set of traffic lights at that intersection. So 300 of them all pile in, and suddenly you get a spike going. There's a need for traffic lights, for instance. That can happen, can't it?
I guess in theory, yes. But this one isn't subject to that because it's a random sample of people that we go and find.
Right. Yes. So this is.
And I don't recall many open-ended responses talking about climate change in the resident.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Thank you, mate. Councillor Harrison-Hunt.
Kia ora, Kath, Peter, Lynn. I've got a couple of questions. I'm actually quite interested in the part where it says that young people in Asian communities are the happiest. And talking about the life in, and thanks Peninsula, sorry Tyrone. And talking about the life in Christchurch piece of that, can you please remind me about what life in Christchurch is in comparison to the wider survey itself?
So again, Life in Christchurch is a survey where we've got a panel of people that have joined the Life in Christchurch panel, and we go out on a range of issues, and they may be about council services, but generally they're broader brush than that, and people give us feedback. Again, Amy, is there anything more on that?
Cool.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to particularly hone in on these two areas, the multicultural community and young people. And are we able to get the breakdown of the feedback in a I guess a more targeted area?
Yeah, there is some information in one of the reports that I've provided you that's got some breakdowns by age, where the data are available that we can rely on at an age level, and also by ethnicity. So I'm happy to go through that with you at some point, but it does look at each service that we scored. Yep. And shows a breakdown by age and by ethnicity.
And I do want to notice the caveat in that is that the key word for that is trust, particularly with Asian communities and young people.
Yes.
So I just wanted to see what that looks like. The next question I've got is around page 5 on the presentation, looking at the comparison on the graph. What's the difference between the deliverables of surveys in 2007 in comparison to now? What's the difference?
This one?
Yeah. It's more about satisfaction. Sorry, we've got a different one, I think. Yeah, page... Yeah, that's the one.
That one? Yeah.
Same. I was going to have the same question,
Okay.
but the difference in terms of 2007 to now,
Yeah.
what kind of mahi is different?
So what we saw prior to the earthquakes was much higher satisfaction in the city. The council had more money back then, in terms of being able to do things with less opportunity cost decisions having to be made. The good old days, yes. But we have seen really a steady decline, and particularly in those latter years that have been really challenging to address. But what I would say, I mean, even back in 2007 and 8, the main issue that people wanted to address was the roads. And I mean, we're seeing with the latest announcement from the government in terms of their pothole fund. Potholes, there are what, 60,000 or something they're saying across the country. I'm not sure how they counted them all, but you know, the issues with roading seem to be at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, regardless of how objective the condition necessarily is of the roads. People are unhappy and have been for a long time. So it's been an issue all along, but it is the area where people are saying they most judge us now in terms of their satisfaction with our organisation performance.
That's great, Kath. And the way that you're delivering is different too, right? In terms of going out into the community.
The survey has changed in recent years from a telephone survey to an online survey, but that was a few years back now. And the main reason for that was we were just finding that getting that representation in terms of telephone numbers just wasn't an efficient way of surveying. But what we did find when the research company looked at that was that that change in methodology didn't necessarily have a particularly big impact on how the questions were answered in the survey. There was still consistency between the years that were before and after.
And last question, thank you for that, is I looked at the age brackets and I was wondering why it was broken down from age 18 to 34, noting that there are obviously completely different perspectives within that age bracket itself.
Yeah, and I do have data for 18 to 24
Great.
and 25 to 34. So it was just trying to sort of collapse it a bit in terms of numbers and for ease of presentation. But I do have some
So
breakdowns
excited.
for
Thank you so much.
younger age groups that I can share with you.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you all for this. It's really useful to run through the issues and look at it. A couple of things, probably not on specifics as much, but more of a high level, what are we going to do about it? So I guess the first one is, it was good to see the trajectory has sort of stopped bleeding, so to speak, and we're on the up. I just wondered, how can we get assurance over the long-term plan that what's reflected in this, or I guess what I'm wanting is a peer review of the long-term plan assessment or the plan versus the resident survey. And I kind of want someone to objectively come back and say, actually, the biggest areas we're focusing on are what align with the resident survey based on this data. So what kind of report can we expect to see before we sign off the LTP, objectively assessing whether our LTP aligns with the resident survey? Because to be blunt, there's no point spending all this money and doing all this work when what we've heard is it's incredibly scientific, that if we don't align them, we're just going to keep doing the same thing again. That's what I'm asking for.
I might grab this one.
do.
Look, the activity plans that underpin the LTP contain all the levels of service that you see from the survey. And set out there is how we've traditionally performed, say against roads, and what we intend to do going forward, and the rationale and logic behind that. Now, in some cases, the funding is what it has always been. So we're looking for an improved result for the same funding. The way to answer your question would be to pull out those levels of service and their trends from the activity plans and where they've arrived at in the draft LTP and say, do the analysis. Is that right? Have we got it right? Because that does line up the survey with the draft LTP.
Yeah, I think that would be really useful. And then maybe I don't know how you do it, Mary, but just thinking it through at some stages, some recommendations on potentially if we need to change things to get best bang for buck in terms of trying to lift that satisfaction of the areas they're telling us. So is that something we can take away and
Yes,
It would be good to see a report come back before the LTP signed off on that one.
for sure.
The other one was, which kind of feeds into it a wee bit, is, and you're probably going to touch on it, just the action plan, I guess, and the reporting. And so I know we get, obviously, the report that, Peter, you do every month at Finance and Performance. And in the comments, it refers to the general managers and the heads of service working with the teams to look at lifting those levels. Are we going to get a more specific response plan to this? Or what's the plan from here, I guess, now that we have the data?
Lynn probably will have something to say in a moment, but there has been action planning behind these surveys before, but it's been more at the staff side rather than shared with council to a great extent. So I don't know, Lynn, if you wanted to add anything to that.
So my suggestion would be that one of the opportunities to engage with staff as to improvements would be in the regular service reporting, as opposed to an integrated action plan across the entire organisation, because that would enable councillors to engage with the relevant heads of service, and you've got a service report today, for example. That would be an opportunity to engage with the relevant services and really understand the drivers of satisfaction and what the improvement plan is.
I guess I don't disagree, but the feedback, the reporting that we get now, literally the comment, I could go and find it, says, and I'm not criticising the team for doing it, but it says that they're working, there's an action plan and they're working with the heads of service, and that's kind of it. So there might be the odd one where we go, we're doing more training and customer services or the like. But I just wonder, I think given this new approach and, the public sort of talking about transparency in that, how can we get more visibility over some key things?
We'll look at this as the new ELT team and look at some of these key areas and say, how do we think we can make a difference and provide better services and have our residents more confident in us.
Yeah.
And then we'll then workshop it with the councillors as well.
That would be great, because it's sort of how do we move the dial and how can we have input into moving the dial is kind of where we get to. And the only, sorry Phil, be really quick. The only other couple of things, we talked last year about chlorination in the resident survey, knowing that 99% of it is beyond our control. In fact, you could probably argue 100% is. Does that have a weighting? I know when I was reading through it, the comments are around the frustration with chlorination. And it's probably that wider question, and it came back to the point you made as well about salaries and that. How do we get context around some of this stuff? So I think about the salaries for management. Do we phrase it in a way that compares it to, government ministries, or I'm thinking of CCHL. We pay our chief executives there substantially more than we pay our team here. And yet we seem to be the ones that get criticised. So can you talk to me about how we'd provide context or how we can help people understand that actually, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys?
Yeah, and I think that is important, that more information is provided perhaps to people so that they can understand a bit more why things are the way they are, because as you say, we've got that one about salaries, we've got the one where people were talking about the mysterious disappearance of managers, and we know that there are legal reasons why that we can't necessarily comment on that, but from the public's point of view, it's just they disappeared and you're saying nothing. As far as the chlorination goes, what they want from you is to get rid of the chlorine, and if it's something that we can't do anything directly about, they want you to lobby the government to make it happen.
Okay.
So
cool.
that was basically what they were saying. They don't like the taste and the smell, and they want it gone now.
Yeah, no, I agree with it. And the only final one is, and it's, you may not know, so don't worry, it was similar to what Tyler had said, but he was going 07. What happened in 15-16 to drop so much? Does anyone...
I think we'd need to do some heavy thinking on that. But just to put that in perspective, we've discussed this before with council, and the common mistake people make is they think, the earthquake. But if you look, there's 6 years after the earthquake, the toughest years of the rebuild, where it remained quite high. It's not an earthquake thing. Some things that have happened in there, a central government has continued to devolve services down to local government, but with no funding. So that's tightened the envelope a bit.
Yep.
You've had the rise of social media, so you can map that against that progress. And there's been greater involvement by central government in things like Three Waters, chlorination, things that didn't happen much before that. So there are a lot of factors that are not necessarily on the page there.
Right, okay.
It would be instructive to really do that analysis and have a
It would
think.
be good to know because it's a massive decline and we sort of haven't recovered.
And that's where, around that time, that we started asking people why they felt the way they did, so that we could get some more information around it.
Okay.
Some of the changes have been associated with different periods of chief executives in the organisation as well, where there's been sometimes a bump when they've been appointed and then a decline afterwards. Could be many reasons.
Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Fields, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, to some degree, the answer you've just given now is kind of what I wanted to sort of tease into a little bit, because it's like, to what degree is this a zeitgeist kind of a thing? So you've kind of touched on that. I'll come back to that in a second, because I mean, you could look at that and go, oh, such and such councillor got elected then and it's been downhill since then, and you could just put names next to some of those declines, but of course that would be silly, right? But you can make numbers say whatever they like in a way, but like there is, as Sam kind of really touched on, like there's this massive step change, so there seems to be some zeitgeist thing there. So is there any by way of comparison, because I am engaged in a community in another territorial authority, and I noticed there that they're really down on their council as well, and that's in another part of the South Island, and it's kind of like, so by way of comparison, to what level can we sort of look at ourselves against other territorial authorities in this country?
Yep.
I mean, really impossible to do it with overseas examples, but like just to sort of see, like, has there been a step change in Auckland or in Southland, or what are the zeitgeist factors?
So it's interesting you asked that, and I sort of thought that could be something that would be of interest to you. So Auckland, for example, their overall satisfaction rate sits at 18%, 18. Dissatisfaction at 41%.
What has it done?
And that's declined since 2022, from 20% to 18%. Dunedin's very similar to us, sitting at 50%, which has been a slight improvement from a reasonable improvement from 43%. Wellington isn't currently asking the overall satisfaction question, but is intending to do so. Selwyn, the last available data I have for them was 2021, and that they were sitting at 69% satisfied, and Waimak in 2022 at 86%. So you can see Auckland, the other really big one, much lower satisfaction rates even than we've got. So
It's not a target, though.
No, but I mean, there is a lot to tease out there. So I've got just to follow up. I mean, there's a huge amount of data there for sure. To what level do we make that data available to the public in a sort of an open source way? Do we do that at all?
all of this is available.
Oh no, but just the underlying raw data. Sorry,
the raw data.
Yeah.
We would have to be careful in terms of how we packaged that, given that some information could be or would need to be confidentialised.
Yeah.
But we make as much available as we can, and I think that the reports that have been provided are pretty comprehensive in terms of the picture of what's actually going on. One thing I would say in terms of overall satisfaction is that when we ask people the reasons why they gave their comment, sometimes it can be based on one interaction they had with the council that might have been a really positive one, or more likely one that was negative, and that can cloud their whole perception of the organisation. And that's why I think I've said in the past that all of us need to be very mindful of the fact that whatever we're doing can actually impact how people feel about the council as a whole, not just one particular aspect or one particular day of something. It can literally cloud people's decision making, and we see that in the results where they will actually say, this happened on this date.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm dissatisfied with you, or
It's very interesting. am I right to continue?
That's cool. No, what I really want to do is
No, that's
one,
all right.
no,
You're
you're
the
fine.
boss.
But I'm just letting. I'd really want to stop at 1 o'clock for lunch. So we've got tons of time. So just as long, sort of quite to keep that in the back of your mind.
I just wanted to comment on Kathleen else because like the way I look at that is like there's it's not like trending. There's just like 2 steps. There's like the time when people were like satisfied, well, mostly satisfied, and then there was a step change. And I'm really interested in the sort of teasing that qualitative stuff out. But anyway, that's
I do think that partly that increase around 15, 16 was when we were starting to see the rebuild taking shape and people feeling very positive about it, and then that perception perhaps that something stalled and there wasn't much happening, and I think that also is something that we do need to bear in mind there.
And just one last, Mr. Mayor, sorry, actually, in a proper question, is there any sort of correlation between and will we get this feedback as governors or councillors between where there's a really noticeable thing between the way residents have responded to something and others have touched on this, and the level of service that we're providing, where there's a really clear advice back to us to say we need to invest more in this to deliver this level of service, better. We've kind of touched on it on loads of different ways, but I guess the question is, are we going to get advice back to us, sort of giving us that kind of steer?
I think it comes back to the analysis that Sam was looking for, which is if we take these results and we compare them to the levels of service for satisfaction that are built into the draft LTP, have we got the mix right?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cotter, please.
My question was around the positive sentiment by ward graph. And I'm just thinking, and it's along similar lines that year on year, different wards have different levels of satisfaction. And if you look at, say, Harewood, at one point in 2021, it was the highest.
Yeah.
And so that sort of feeds into the question that if there is one thing happening in the ward, and it's probably a roading thing, it affects the entire response.
Yeah.
And that sort of leads into, well, how much weight do we put on this whole thing or every other response to the questions that someone's asked when they've got something going on in the ward that's causing disruption?
Although what I would say with this is positive sentiment across every aspect of services that people have responded to. So it will be more than just one issue based. But yes, it does leap around year by year, and
what
the
I'm
exact
talking
reason
about
for that I'm not
is how
sure.
you deftly phrased it, clouding the response. And it's interesting that the roading is always always has been the first priority comment, and I wonder if that's because in some ways when you ask a question that's the first thing that comes to people's minds. So it's a difficult one to
although the way these ones are calculated, they're based on specific questions about particular services, so it's not an open-ended question that's led to this scoring and categorisation. It's very specific about every service that is being measured via the resident survey. So
how do you
unless
explain
they are saying that the roading issue is clouding their rationale for scoring a completely unrelated service low, then like for example, how satisfied are you with library staff and the manner and support you get from library staff or from swimming pools or whatever. That's how these ones are calculated. It's not based on an open-ended assessment.
So how do you explain the constant swinging around between wards and the different responses?
At the moment, I struggle to be able to explain it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just presenting it as it is. We would probably need to look further into it and do some more research to try and understand that a bit more.
Okay, and the other thing is that when we talked about the chlorination issue in the last survey and because that's definitely clouding people's response to the water question. And really, to me, the water question is when you turn your tap on, does water come out? Then I think we suggested, could that be removed from the negative
Well,
comments?
reliability and
Yeah.
responsiveness for
Yeah.
water supplies has improved.
Yeah.
So it's the quality question. But I mean, my concern, I suppose, with dropping the quality one is that people would say, why have you removed that important
yeah,
aspect?
that's
Because
right.
they want to be able
Can't
to say
win.
it.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's better to let them respond to that and then also see, but what about how reliable and responsive we are as well, so that we can get a bit of I suppose, a more
steer,
accurate picture, because if you don't have that quality one, then you're probably going to see lower results for the reliability and responsiveness, because they'll just put their views into that. So,
Okay, right. Councillor Templeton, please.
Kia ora, thanks so much for this. These are always really interesting documents, and there's so much mahi that goes into them, so thank you. A couple of key questions, sort of based on following up to Sam's point and Lynn's, and I think they're two slightly different things, and I do agree that we need something that comes back before the LTP is finalised to look at how we're doing that, and basing some of our decisions off the residents' survey, and we've done that in the past, and that's been really useful. But Lynn's point, I think that regular ongoing as part of this, the service area reports, I think is really important, because that not only speaks to how the plans for improving each one of those areas, but it also talks to the openness and transparency part of the resident satisfaction survey, and actually making sure that we are regularly letting people know how we're planning to improve these areas and what's happening in that space. The only problem with that I can see is that there's some areas of the resident satisfaction survey that aren't covered in the regular service area reports, and one of those is the governance and decision making space. And I'm wondering if, while the other service areas will be having their planning for increasing resident satisfaction, whether we actually need to develop a plan, an actual specific plan to increase resident satisfaction with our governance and decision making. And there's lots of aspects within that. Is that possible to...
So I think that would be ideally picked up with the initiative that Mary suggested, that the newly established ELT would take that into account in terms of a plan for an improvement.
Yeah, and it would be good if that was a plan that was able to be open, transparent as well, so we can actually show the residents of the city, hey, we've heard that this is an area that concerns you over our decision making and those kind of things, makes wise decisions about spending. These are the things that we're doing as an organisation to help improve that. And I think having that public facing would be really good. I see there's a new question on page 206, which is really good. It says the council balances the needs of today's residents with planning for the future of the city, which is great. So thank you for including that as a new one. I see the first result is at 34%. So hopefully we will improve on that. I'm just wondering, given the sort of lining up of the priorities in here versus what we're spending in the LTP, whether we could have a slightly more specific question as well, and it's one that is increasingly asked in surveys, both nationally and internationally, and that is, do you believe that council is doing enough to mitigate and adapt to climate change? That's one that gets asked quite frequently in various surveys.
We are actually at the moment planning a Life in Christchurch survey that will cover some of those issues as well. So that is due to go out in the next couple of months. We're just drafting it at the moment, and that will definitely be in there.
Great. And is that one of the sort of Life in Christchurch ones? So I just know that, and I really appreciate that, and I think that'll be really good. But I know from the comments we've heard around the table today, sometimes the less than scientific nature of the opt-in part of that means that some might not trust the results as much. So having a similar question in this more scientific survey might be good.
On that, what we often do as well is benchmark the two against each other. So if we ask something in the resident survey, we ask it in a Life in Christchurch survey and see how they're tracking against each other. So we keep an eye on how the results are going that way, and there is a degree of consistency where we do that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But if you could look at adding one in here, that would be really good. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, no, I'm good now, Phil.
Good. Okay, Councillor Coker.
I was wondering what dates these surveys were collected.
Some are in field throughout the year, and then we've got others that are done over the summer months, sort of like November through to the end of January. So when we've got students, they come on scholarship over summer,
Right,
and
yeah.
then the general service satisfaction survey is done in mid to late January.
Because what I was thinking is, and it's already been talked about how we link this into the LTP, but it always seems a bit weird to me when we get this result. It would make far more sense to get this in October or November or even at another time to link it in with the activity plans, because like our LTP process was quite a disruptive one this time, but I felt like we didn't really look into that. I know
You can answer.
had lots of presentations on the activity plans in each area, but we didn't really, in my opinion, delve into the activity plans to really look at them properly and then link this in, which is what you'd think would be, which is what everyone's saying, but you'd think there would be a process that we would actually do annually to really, because that is the way, like everyone's saying, to do it. And I think the timing is part of the problem, although you can use obviously these results for the next one and this one now, but it would be better to do it when we're looking at the activity plans, which we've already done months ago.
I need to think and take some advice on whether the timing change would mean that the data set remains consistent over years. I don't know if the timing change would necessarily change the result. I have heard people say that surveys taken in summer are different to surveys taken in winter, for example. We can certainly explore the possibility. I mean, the timing is not really a resource impact for us, but it is. Sorry, I'll step back a moment. We do this in the cheapest possible way, which is students on scholarship from the uni.
Yeah.
And we do need to access those when they're actually available to do it.
Well, then I guess we're not actively, though, putting this information into an activity plan assessment when we get to all of our LTP and annual
Well,
plans.
without quibbling, the activity plans you got contained all of the results from last year as a trend to say, this is how we're going, this is what we're doing, and this is what we're aiming to do in the LTP. But I do hear your point.
Yeah. No, that's helpful, thank you. And I was wondering, have we had any comments, do we get comments in this survey? People talk about what they don't like or do like, but do we have any comments about what they would actually like us to do to see an improvement?
Yes, there is a section on improvement, on the services that they want improved, and that is...
But it's not just what, but how. Like, what would make an improvement? Like, what would make an improvement, for how they get the results of our council decisions, which are all a newsline and they're in the newspaper and all of these things. So what would make an actual improvement to people's understanding?
I think the challenge with the resident survey is it's so big, it's a very big program, and it can't necessarily go into perhaps that level of detail with people, so it would probably need to be some follow-up research that we did. Yeah.
Maybe. And with the...
Come on, let's go. We're doing well.
Sorry, I was just wondering with the wards and looking at satisfaction in general, and also what you said about like the different territorial authorities, and we see it with Banks Peninsula. It seems, and this is my take on it, it seems that the more connected communities are, maybe the smaller they are in number, but maybe that those communities are just more satisfied in general. Would you agree with that? Is there a case for the more connected that people are, the more happy they are?
I don't know really whether we've got enough information from this at this stage to say that. Yeah, we would. I think we would really need to do some more research to try and understand it more.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Remembering that we've got debate before 1 o'clock. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I guess my question kind of follows on a wee bit from Mel. I'm kind of trying to understand our communication with residents and where they build their impression of council from. Is there any exploration of that? You know, for instance, is it positive headlines? Is it negative headlines? Is it their experience with a staff member? So, you know, getting some weight around what they've based their overall impression of council on.
And I think that's a really good question, because that graph I was showing you before of the disconnect between the way they rate various things shows that probably in terms of things like their overall satisfaction score and that reputation and trust one, they may be getting information from other sources that impact how they perceive the organisation. Whereas if you look at the level of service target score and the positive sentiment, they're very direct assessments of particular services. So it's showing to me that there's probably something else that's influencing people's decision making around how they score overall performance and reputation and trust than just necessarily a direct exposure to using one of our services. Amy, have we done any more research in Life in Christchurch on these issues? We could look further at it.
Okay, you all done, Kel?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that'd be a great thing to explore, actually, where people are getting their impression of council from, because I think that's probably something to do with the reason over time that satisfaction has gone down so markedly.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you. Looking at that satisfaction rating, I'm incredibly disturbed to see Hornby so low. Was there any qualification question asked as to why they'd be so dissatisfied in the Hornby ward particularly?
No, look, all I've done is literally so that I can give you a little bit of information that's broken down at a ward level, taken all of those positive sentiment scores and basically done a cross tab by ward. So the only thing I can say is in looking into it, there seem to be slightly lower ratings around some of those reputation and trust measures and around overall satisfaction compared with some of the other wards. So, yeah.
And I guess one huge question in my mind is on the timing of the survey. Would this have been post the organics processing facility announcement and the eco gas landing into the Hornby community? Because that could well sway the result quite badly, I'd imagine.
Again, I suppose it's a similar answer to the question that Councillor Cotter asked. The measurements were very specific about particular services, so they weren't sort of just a free-for-all, are you feeling positive about council services, which might have then led to a swaying by particular decisions like that. These are all of the various aspects of services that have been rated. So I think it would be unlikely that led to that specific response, other than perhaps it did influence some of the governance responses, where people are saying you didn't listen to our priorities or you didn't listen at all. Yeah.
Cool. 'Cause, I mean, I would certainly be really interested to have some further analysis as to why people are feeling like that in the community, and how, as a council and as a local councillor, can we work to get that, satisfaction raised. Certainly, it would be interesting if there was a survey done after the opening of the Maratiki Centre in late April. I bet you get a far better response. So, yeah, I'm just dubious around some of the timing. And another question I've got in my mind, seeing as how we're in the heart of the LTP and the draft has now been, struck, will there be potentially some adjustments of the levels of service expectations in the LTP as it's confirmed to perhaps help realign some of these areas that are not being met on a continual basis?
As I said earlier with several of the councillors, I think we've been asked to come back to you with an analysis to say these are levels of service around satisfaction in the draft LTP. How do they line up with the new results? Have we got the mix right? Yep. I'd just like to offer one suggestion when you're talking about plans that might arise from that, and that is that it's very traditional for councils to talk about what staff need to do, and sometimes that extends to what governance needs to do.
Yep.
But a hell of a lot of our interactions, whether it's maintenance, pipes, roading, whatever, is contractors.
Yep.
If you don't bring the contractors with you, that is a huge percentage of your interactions that are simply not on the page.
Yep.
Councillor Johansson, please.
Thank you. Just at a high level for the satisfaction, so just getting away from the sentiment, but from the satisfaction, dissatisfaction, is there a page, sorry, there's lots of information, but is there a page that shows the ward breakdown for that?
There is a ward breakdown not a ward breakdown, a community board breakdown in the general service satisfaction report, but I would be loath to do it by ward because the numbers would be too small.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just interested in that sentiment for the specific services versus the general sentiment in terms of the satisfaction and understanding what's happening at each ward. So is it possible to get that by community board and by ward, even though accepting
have a look at it.
the limitations that it might have? I was interested in the sentiment as to how many people lead to a percentage increase or decrease.
In terms of the overall satisfaction, or
yeah, so say if there's a 10% decrease in the positive sentiment.
Yep.
How many
the sample
people
was 770 in total for the overall satisfaction score. 70 people. So that's the total sample size. So depending obviously on what the percentage increase or decrease might be.
Sorry, so I'm just moving away from the satisfactions thing to the sentiment graph that you have.
She answered the question. You answered the question very well. I thought, if it's going 10%, it's 770.
No, but if it's
Carry on. No, you're right.
So you're talking.
No,
that's the sentiment.
The sentiment one.
The sentiment one has a lot more people in it than
That there.
Yeah, it's got 84,000 scores by
Yeah.
9,500 respondents.
So there is information in the report about numbers of respondents associated with that in the overview report that I've done.
So trying to understand, for example, take the Linwood one. Last year there was 47% of people in terms of positive sentiment, and this year it's gone up to 57%. So I'm trying to understand is what bigger swing of people or responses is that in terms of the 10%?
I'd need to have a look at that. Yeah, I can't answer that here.
Yeah, who knows? But because I worry that maybe some of these swings, it's not so many people causing a swing, and therefore it looks dramatic.
Yeah.
But it's probably less dramatic.
Yeah, I mean, this is really presented to just give you a sort of a general overview. I wouldn't get too focused on this particular one.
Okay.
But I can get some more information around that.
I was interested in what we're doing. Like, obviously 18's the lowest age. What are we doing around children? Because it seems to me we've got a whole group of people in our society, in our city, that we're not hearing from, and I'd be really interested to understand what work we're doing in that space or how we could get that information.
Well, we're certainly not surveying them as part of the resident survey. I mean, there are issues around consent for surveying children, and it's not something we're doing with Life in Christchurch, really, is it?
Right. Because I know we've agreed to be a child-friendly city, and as part of that, we've asked to do the work around monitoring things to do with children. But how could we do that? How could we get something like? What's the solution to getting that information?
Right.
Could we lower it to 16? Could we go to 14? Could we go to 12?
I think what we would need to do, Councillor, is to make an assessment as to what the implications would be. This is not a simple process. What we do is in specific areas, such as in the coastal hazards work, there's been a level of engagement with local schools and young people in those areas for a specific topic, but we have not as yet assessed the cost and implications of a completely representative sample of children.
Thank you. Good answer. Thank you, Lynn.
Sorry,
Councillor Donovan, please.
I've just got one.
How many
very
more?
quick one.
2 more?
Yeah, 2 more.
Right.
One is
short ones, please.
Yeah, very short. The roads and footpaths, again, it's got community board, not wards. Can we get that broken down by wards?
Possibly, but it wouldn't necessarily be something that I would be that comfortable with just in terms of numbers.
Okay, because the sentiment is quite different between the 3 wards and that community board. So I guess I'm trying to understand if there's things like roading or footpaths that's an outlier for the individual wards. And then the final question is, given the whole issue around people feeling engaged in local democracy, reputation, trust, feeling informed, feeling like they've got influence on our decisions, I know we've previously done things like an engagement working party and done some changes, but is there anything else the organisation's considering? Because, I mean, just very quick, but it seems to me that we're doing a lot more rushed consultations. We've got shorter time frames.
So Councillor Johansson, that's not a question for this group of people who are reporting on a survey. They're not reporting on our response to it. We will come back.
Right, but was there anything picked up in the comments as a kind of general trend about, because I've seen there's been a response to service requests not being followed through. Is there anything around the timeliness of our decision making that we should be aware of from the comments?
Not specifically.
Okay, great answer. Thank you very much, Councillor Donovan, and then we're going into debate.
Just real quick ones. In terms of the way that we're sampling people, is the method is online only, is it?
No, we've got a range of methods. We've got face-to-face surveying, we've got mail drop surveys, we've got telephone survey and online. So there's a whole mix across the resident survey program.
And do you think that that's improved the sort of sample range in terms of being more representative?
I think we've got it probably about as right as we're going to without a lot more money being invested in it. I think we do pretty well in terms of representation. Yeah.
Thank you. Right, before we go into debate, I'd just like to say, Kath, I congratulate you for what you've done. You answered every question, and I sort of congratulate councillors because they're very good questions, and that's why we let it go on as long as we have. So hats off to you and your team. Thank you very much. So I'm happy to move this, and Councillor McDonald's happy to second it. Should we debate? So have we got any... Okay, yeah.
It's really different.
Look, I think these are really good scientific results that we should reflect on as a council. I think the biggest takeaway from this is actually getting that objective view and lining up this result with whether our LTP actually strikes a balance where we can move the dial. If we can get that before we sign off the LTP, we'll be in a really good position in terms of knowing if we can actually move the dial. The heartening thing for me, though, is that sort of bleeding in terms of satisfaction has stopped and it's on the up. But it's on all of us as we work through the LTP. Once we've got that objective advice on whether we've hit the right marks to do it properly, and we need to focus on that.
Thank you, Councillor Templeton, and then Barbara.
I find myself agreeing with Councillor McDonald. Thank you. It will be really good to have a really good view of how we're improving those key areas that the residents are dissatisfied in, especially with that physical infrastructure space, and not just in a view of how much money we spend on it, but actually how much physical work we are doing on it. And we tend to look at the dollars spent, which is difficult when construction costs vary, those kind of things. And so having a really good overview, and I guess we'll deal with that in the water report coming up this afternoon. The one area that doesn't get dealt with in the LTP and in other sort of service area reports is the governance and decision-making space. And so I think that it would be really good if we could, as an organisation and as a group of elected members, have a really good look at that space, how we improve the transparency and openness, how we improve people's understanding and therefore decision-making, how we improve the public's understanding of council processes and how things work. I'll note that today's agenda is a very weighty 800 pages. The average reader reads at about 300 words a minute. And on Friday, we got the equivalent of these 2 tomes, very weighty tomes. That's the equivalent of our agenda that we got on Friday. And it's quite difficult for anyone to absorb and understand and make good decisions on that volume without time to digest and discuss and those kind of things. And so I'd really like to see us make a move to going back to having briefings well ahead of time, have time to digest the information, and having them public will be good because then the public can understand the issues and things much better than they can through trying to wade their way through a really hefty agenda before a meeting. And I think that will do us well. And I think putting together a plan generally to help raise the community's trust in our decision making, I think would be really good. And making sure that that plan is open and transparent itself means that then the community can hold us to account to whether we're actually sticking to it. And I'm really looking forward to doing that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Barber, please.
Yeah, look, I think we always need to be very critical of ourselves and look very hard at how we're sort of serving the ratepayers, and questionnaires are a great way to understand that. I would like to better understand where and how ratepayers are getting their information or forming their impression of council, because when you do talk to people, there are a lot of people out there who think we do a great job in certain areas, and they have a great experience. But you know, we come to work to solve problems, and we need to find out, you know, where they're getting this impression and where they feel that we're letting them down. I'd also like to see us, I guess, really focus on kind of understanding what it is that we are doing well, and really, yeah. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. But yeah, I do really want to understand where people are thinking, where they're getting their impressions from about our services, and I think we should better understand that. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Councillor Peters, please.
Thank you. As you would have heard in my questioning, as the councillor of Hornby, I'm really disturbed to see my community being bottom of the satisfaction ratings. I'm really keen to work with the community and try and figure out why they feel that way. And I mean, all of us around the table here work really hard for our communities, and I do tend to agree with Councillor Templeton there about the volume of information that's thrown at us. The 800 odd pages for this agenda being thrown at us late last week to try and digest in time for this meeting is, I think, untenable. Right. It would be good for us to find a way to move back towards better informing us as elected members as to what the details are of a lot of this information that's dumped on us in that agenda like that, to allow the people to have trust in the fact that we are making well-informed and good decisions is really what my goal is, so that we can all feel comfortable around this table to be making the good, well-informed decisions for our community to try and earn their trust. And I'm really keen for us to take a really deep dive into this data that's in this resident survey and figure out what we can do differently to try and move the dial. To carry on doing the same and expecting a different result would be insanity. And I don't want to be judged as being insane in charge of our city, so hopefully none of the rest of us want to. So let's see how we can change things and how we can listen to results of a survey like this and work with the community to change their perception to give them, as best that we can, the results they need to be able to be satisfied with what we do and trust in what we do. I mean, we've all got the best intentions for Christchurch, so let's work hard, even more hard than we are, to try and win the trust of our people and to get this council back as a top rating, because we work pretty hard for them and we really want to make sure that they're satisfied. So I know that Hornby will be happy with today's decision to pass the library to the community centre. That's a great day. They'll be happy in April when the Maratiki Centre opens. So we've got some good positive stuff going out there. So hopefully the dial can start moving really quickly on that satisfaction out there. But we've seen roading come through in that satisfaction survey as being a repeated dissatisfaction. So hey, let's see how we can very quickly move the dial on some of the roading to try and win the better impression and better satisfaction of our residents.
Thank you. Councillor Fields, please.
Brilliant. There's quite a lot to tease out here, isn't there?
Let's hear all about Banks Peninsula.
I appreciate the complexity of undertaking an analysis like this, because it's definitely not easy to do. But they say the numbers don't lie. When it comes to painting a picture, they can speak in hieroglyphics a little bit. I encourage residents, though, to raise issues and tell us what they love and what they want more of, but which they have done. But more importantly, I want them to us to be able to record it, to analyse it, and to use it to provide advice and direction for us. Because, I really want this council to keep investing in this team and the types of people who do this work, because I'm looking around, I see some incredibly capable people here, but supercharging this type of work can help us in steering us towards really good investment decisions. I know, Sam, you talked about that a little bit earlier on, and what I would call good social investment, and that's kind of what we're about. Just on another note, or sort of a slightly different tangent, we had Grant McKinnon, a property developer, in here the other day telling us how much he valued the work the City Council does and how it helped him in property development, which was so refreshing. It was so encouraging. So we clearly do some things well, as Councillor Barber said. But I really believe in encouraging positivity in our communities and actually changing the narrative. That's something that we have in our power to do. And I see people stoking up negative stuff all the time, ostensibly for political gain. But in my experience, that is a fast-track route to failure. So please, as we go into this LTP, we just need to show some leadership and to help our residents understand the challenges and the enormous amount of hard work that goes into growing what is a really wonderful city, and to help us make that step change to the city narrative. So I really want to encourage us to do that. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Cotter?
Positive media is really helpful, isn't it, too? So hopefully we'll get some of that. I just wanted to say I was a little bit concerned about the kind of the mixed views when some people say, well, the streets are not safe, but there's mixed views about spending to make them safer, those sort of things. But I know that there's more work to be done on teasing all the real data out of it, and we'll look forward to your guidance on that. And so rather than this being used as a council sort of a kicking exercise, it's really, as Sam has said, it's a guide for us to overlay over the LTP and make sure we get our priority spending right. So that's the way I'm looking at this. So thanks for all the work, rather you doing that than me, because I find statistics very dry, but we'll look forward to more guidance.
Okay, just one little bit for me, and then I've got two more. One thing we've got to look at, and I thank you very much for what you've done, and it's all very well we put it down into wards, and some councillors may feel, I haven't done enough, or some others are going, well, look at me. We're here as a city, and it's not just, we're a group of councillors in ward, but we've got to do what's best for the whole shebang. So so thank you very much and the information you've given us is very good. Thank you. Councillor Harrison Hunt, please.
Kia ora koutou. I firstly want to give a shout out to Kath, Peter and Lynn for the amazing, comprehensive, and the team, comprehensive survey that we saw today. It's something that I've never seen before, but my feedback is exactly the same as last year, ironically, and I wasn't quite surprised, but on a no surprises basis, let that not surprise you. There is a few underlying issues that we know happens, and we know has always been there since 2007. For me, my places of interest are around what does it look like at a neighbourhood level, and we know that local feedback matters, and the priorities are not the same within community board areas. For example, Riccarton has different issues to Horswell, and Horswell has different issues to Hornby, yet for some reason, and by all means it's great that they're collated into one, but I would like to see the breakdown about what that means, because that helps us steer our direction around what we should be doing for not only for our wards but for our cities. And when I talk about being a city councillor, I'm a city councillor by supporting you and your wards. I support you because you know exactly what you need to do in your areas. So yes, we are looking at it from a city lens in some perspectives, but when we're representing our communities, we want to support each other at this table. And lastly, PR is very important. Public relations are very important. And I'd like to give a little shout out to the Riccarton Collective and all of the communities that are within that, because democracy does work when it's about togetherness, unity, and also diversity of thought. So I do recognise that the older generations particularly want to focus more on footpaths so they're able to access it. But the younger generations also want to focus on footpaths, but it's about transport safety, not necessarily the quality of the footpath. So if we're able to meet in the middle and find some consensus around what exactly can we do for everybody, that's the money point that I'm trying to get at here. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do to find some action. I actually think I'm a bit pessimistic because we were in the same position last year saying, oh, what do we do? The survey's damning. What are we going to do? But nothing's changed. And that's on us to be able to change that. There are so many things going on at a unit level that need to be talked about. For example, transport have this amazing AI technology that goes around and talks about the quality of the roads and takes mapping of it. The community don't know about that. There are so many things. The footpath maintenance crew, phenomenal. You know, there are things that we can do to provide the public the knowledge of what awesome things that we do as a city council. Nō reira, kia ora koutou.
Okay, so I said 1 o'clock. We either listen to 3 more people, or we come back after lunch. Come back after lunch? Righto, that'll do me. See you at 2 o'clock.